Hello, and welcome to the Nikon booth in the Nikon Theater. So throughout the show, we've had some incredible speakers, and along the way, we've had some fan clubs. So it's kind of hard not to notice that we have a Jide Alakija fan club here. Yeah, that's beautiful. Oh, you guys are amazing. Well, if you are his fan club, if you're not in the fan club, you will be by the time the next 30 minutes is up. But he is an internationally renowned photographer with over 10 years experience in shooting multicultural weddings, documentaries, and editorial campaigns. His assignments have taken him all over the world: Africa, Europe, the Middle East, Asia, and of course here in the US. And the one thing I love about him, and I did do my research and homework, and of course the imagery just pops immediately, and it screams just amazing talent. But he's keen, in his words, to share his expertise with the next generation of photographers coming up, and that means more to me than anything in this business, because that's what we need to do, is inspire the next generation. So he holds an undergraduate and master's degree in engineering from Imperial College in London, England. I feel so inferior all of a sudden, but I'll still continue on. He resides in Brooklyn, New York, and let me, without wasting any more time, bring him up to the stage, steps towards the iconic moment, Jide Alakija.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Hi everyone, can you hear me? Yeah? All right, so my name is Jide Alakija. That's how you spell my name. That's how it's pronounced. I am a British-born Nigerian photographer. I photograph weddings around the world. I also do a lot of street photography, and my street photography and wedding photography has greatly influenced each other. So today we're going to talk about iconic moments, or at least steps towards that. And in my own journey as a street photographer, I'm currently just trying to create work that is somewhat iconic. So let's define a moment. Normally I would ask you guys what a moment is, but I don't think I have enough time. But in my own pursuit, when I was preparing this talk, I decided to go to the Oxford English Dictionary to find out what a moment was. And I came up with these three different definitions that came out from the dictionary. First one was a brief moment in time, which kind of defines a moment from a past tense, right? If you look at the second definition, it says the appropriate time for doing something like an opportunity. It's kind of like the future. And then we look at like the current tense, a particular stage in the development of something or an idea or something. And these are the definitions of a moment in the dictionary as it is today, the official definitions. But I don't feel they encapsulate what a moment is, at least not as photographers. This definition, for me, really tells everything. This is Don McCollum, who is one of my heroes. He's a British war photographer. And he says that photography for him is not just looking, but it's also feeling. And it's really about trying to get people to feel something when they look at your photographs, because otherwise, what is the point, right? So we're going to go to the issue of the iconic moment. And again, as I love to sort of start by looking at definitions, I started out by looking at what does it mean to be iconic, right? And iconic is kind of representative of something that's an icon. So what is an icon? An icon is like, should I say, a person, something that represents an idea, something that really represents something key. So the iconic moment, if anything, is that representation, but somewhat memorable. In looking at iconic moments, I decided to kind of go through history and look at some photographs that are somewhat iconic. Everyone knows this photograph, right? This is a photograph of Muhammad Ali standing over Sonny Liston, screaming out at him, "Stand up and fight." You know what's actually so funny about this photo is that he's actually the assistant of the photographer, if you see between his legs, and he was standing in that position. And he went, obviously his boss went to the toilet. He came back and said, "You, get away, you're not in the big leagues." So he comes to this position and he captures this moment. And this moment is so iconic because of so many things like gesture, the space. He's obviously been following Muhammad Ali. This is another one that kind of illustrates space, illustrates lines and all these kind of things, and it's very, very iconic when you look at the gesture of Muhammad Ali walking in his victory towards the corner. Nicholas Safori obviously has a great relationship, or at least been following Usain Bolt throughout his career. And obviously with that relationship, he's kind of known that, you know what, at Beijing, this guy's times are so great that he's going to gas the rest of the people behind him. So he chose a position where he knew would be able to represent exactly where the best photograph would be taken to represent this moment. And of course, you can see the results of that. This moment itself is somewhat iconic because it shows the time when he didn't just break the record, he smashed it. Talking about positioning, again, this is a photograph that is so popular around the world except in China because it kind of shows the strength of, or rather the strength of the Chinese war machine brought down to its knees by a bystander that is looking. Everyone knows this photograph by Pete Souza. And this photograph really represents a lot of things for a lot of people. The fact that Pete has kind of positioned himself where this rainbow is kind of shining a beacon of hope or a rainbow of color for a lot of people, if anything, is somewhat iconic of this day and for time to come. But then there's also the converse, right? The change of regime, if you want to call it, between two different leaders of very, very different points of view. And what's really so amazing in this photograph is not even just the two people, but the person in the back, right? So just really considering the space as well is one of the things that really makes it iconic. For those of you who don't know, the person in that photograph is George Washington. Right, so why do we do this? What is the point? Why are we seeking for these iconic moments? And I think this definition, or rather this quote, really talks a lot when it says, we're trying to tell people about who we are. This is the reason why we take these photographs. Well, we're doing them because it tells you something about reality. Again, I photograph weddings around the world, particularly in Nigeria, where I come from. This represents the kind of thing that I go through every time as a wedding photographer. But this image itself, for me, tells me something about the person who's being photographed, the bride. And I feel it's somewhat iconic to her in the sense that all eyes are on her throughout the whole day. Everyone's got their phones, everyone's got like their iPads and all that kind of stuff that you use today to try and capture the moment itself. And you can almost feel that, get that sense of nerves like I'm feeling right now. Anyway, this carries on throughout the whole day. In this institution over here, they call it a church. You have photographers taking photographs of the moments of what's happening over here, because this is the point where the couple have officially been called husband and wife. In this particular institution, you have to wear a yellow jacket to kind of distinguish yourselves from the other photographers and from everyone else. And you're probably asking the question, if that's the case, then why is it then you have some photographers over here who aren't wearing jackets? And such is the situation in a third world country where the corruption has completely watered down news reporting, that now it's very common for people to pay photographers to photograph weddings, to put the photograph on the front page of the newspaper. You'd find that quite a lot in these countries. Alongst my travels in Havana, for instance, now, one of the things I really love about this D750 is just its ability to capture things so quickly. This was along the Malecon in Havana. You had this man running along, again, the Malecon, and I think you could almost feel the situation of what's going to happen over here, right? In the sense that, I think about half a second after I hit the trigger, you can almost feel like this guy's going to be completely encapsulated by this wave. And you almost think, oh my God, I hope he's okay. I hope he's not hurt. And I don't want to be in that position. And that's the whole point about feeling when you look at a moment. In the city that I come from, or at least where my parents come from, you have traffic, like horrendous traffic all over the place. You can almost imagine the person in this position over here, what he's feeling. It's very, very normal to be in traffic for at least 3, 4, 5 hours on your way home. Typically, people wait in the offices for at least 2, 3 hours after work is done before they go home, just to avoid this. This is a really good situation that people go through in these situations. Along my travels, I was in a car, and I was fortunate to see these two gentlemen who are actually riding on a bike that's moving at about 50 miles an hour. The guy in the back, who's sitting at the back, is what we call a cobbler, a guy who kind of fixes wheels for cars. He's just done a day's work. He's carrying the stuff he would normally sell to his clients or to his customers' home because he's not sold anything. He has no storage, and he has to use the cheapest means of transport. I count about 7 wheels he's got to carry for about a whole hour's journey. This is kind of the thing that is somewhat iconic to this day of this particular environment. But obviously, things may change. But you have to kind of think about those things because you can almost feel for this particular person. In Rwanda, I got the opportunity to photograph some orphans who were kids of people who fought in the genocide. And these are children in the classroom. And I got to witness how little they had in terms of books and amenities and all whatnot. And one of the things I felt like this image represented was also the fact that the amount of light that they would use to kind of learn the things that they were learning is very minimal. And this pretty much represents that. And finally, this image itself really is very, very dear to me in the sense that in the same city itself that my parents are from, there is a big change. You can almost call it gentrification, where all the buildings are kind of being destroyed and you have like new buildings being brought up. Lagos itself has a very strong Portuguese history. The door here represents that history, and the kids kind of represents the future, right? This image is titled No More Lies, in the sense that these kids are kind of have hope for the great things that you expect them to have, and they've been promised time and time again that things are going to get better and better and better, whereas things are actually getting worse, and them covering their face is kind of trying to sort of not believe in that narrative. So as a photographer, my mission is this. Every time I'm taking a photograph in a wedding or on the streets, this really is what I'm trying to do. I'm not just photographing for today, but I'm photographing for the future. So I put all my energies, all my strength, I put everything into it to really capture the essence of what it is that I feel this moment is actually going to mean. My very good friend Tyler Workin actually said one day when we're talking is that the photographs we're taking today are not for the people that exist today, but they're actually for the people who exist tomorrow and beyond. That's something to think about. So, one of the things that I've always get asked every time I'm teaching is that, where can I get these photographs? How do I capture these moments? Where do these moments happen? And I watched a video by one of the greatest photographers in the world, a Magnum photographer by the name of Elliot Ewart, who says, if you want to capture interesting photographs, you have to go to interesting places. And it's really that simple. And it's about what is interesting to you, what connects with you. I like to keep things very simple. And what I mean by that is as simple as possible. I don't want to be thinking too much about what I'm doing or what I'm carrying with me. I want to be able and be ready to work with what I have, almost like I'm using an iPhone, for instance, now. So I work with as little gear as possible, as little settings as possible. I just use 2 ISOs, and pretty much that. And the thing is, you don't have to aim to try and make things complicated. You don't have to put your couples in very weird positions. It's not about putting them in danger. You really want to kind of create situations that, if anything, will actually create that moment. So like I said, it's about being very, very simple, very, very clean. I always work with guidelines. These are these are my guidelines. These are the points that I follow. Light and shade, lines and shape, color, and most of all, gesture. In every single shot that I'm taking, in every single moment that I'm seeking, I try and consider all 4 of these. And I noticed that even those pictures that I showed you at the beginning, this is pretty much what they're all about. So how do we start? We work the scene. I have a sequence over here that I'm going to show you how I kind of typically work whenever I'm photographing a wedding. Whoops, let's go back. Ah, there we go. Anyway, so this is a sequence of photographs that I've taken. Normally, typically on a wedding, this is how I work. And I'm approaching the scene of the entrance of the bride into the car. And I kind of set the scene based on the fact that she's in South Kensington, which is what the buildings represent in the background, and just really just taking as many clicks as I can take to really sort of represent really what is actually happening, and in an attempt to kind of seek what the actual moment is all about. And I'm keeping a watchful eye on what's actually happening. As things are happening, she's looking at me. Obviously, she's very camera aware. I keep clicking. And then obviously something happens, and she gets very shy, obviously. Somebody comes into the window. I dial down my exposure to try and capture that person's reaction as well, because something might happen, but just keep clicking. They're having a discussion. She blows a kiss. They blow a kiss towards each other. And then she says to her, "Hey, do you mind taking a photograph of me?" And she's like, "Yeah, sure." So she digs into that sunken place. And then before you know it, boom, problem solved. Someone else comes over into the shot and then it's like, "Hey, great." And through that, I've taken about 88 frames there. I'm able to get that, but more importantly, I'm able to capture this reaction, right? So how do I do this? Shoot using context, right? Using layering, sorry. So this is a photograph taken by my second shooter. We were in Lebanon photographing a really beautiful wedding. The bride said to me that, "Hey, I spent so much money on my decor, you need to see it, it's amazing." I went out and I saw the decor and I thought, "Oh my God, I've got to do something with this." And I layered the decor with her entrance as she was walking into the space. We always like to get the first kiss, but that's always a great moment. But always think about what's happening as well around that. The first kiss itself may be great, but then there's also the interactions of everyone else that's happening before the kiss. Using the same approach, there's always more to the main shot that you're looking at. Like the bride who's been told that her groom is around and ready to get married, and she steals a peek before this actually happens. Or you have 3 birds hoisting a dress while 3 other birds observe it. Or a bridezilla who says, "Do you know what? I need to keep an eye on every single thing every woman here is doing," right? You've always got to aim for depth. Don't always go for the obvious thing, because sometimes there's a lot more happening that you aren't sort of seeking. A lot of African churches have a lot of family involved in things. You bring them together, and of course, the obvious moment is run in there and try and capture things. Listen to what's going on. Listen to what's being said, because it may actually touch you. So I ran to the shoulder of the groom, and I noticed this moment as it just happened at that point, right? African churches have a lot of white Jesus in them. And of course, you can always create some great moments as well with that, because then you could be looking over in different points of view as well. And also, you've also got to be present. Of course, when you get this moment, auntie and mom are crying, you know, as the bride walks in, you're like, "Wow, great moment." But also be aware of the fact that things are happening behind you as well. Keep shooting through, because you might find that the groom might want to surprise you as well. Another thing that's also so important is gestures. I scream this all the time whenever I'm shooting my colleagues. Look for gestures, LEMs, limbs, ears, and mouth. They tell you the full story of what is actually happening at that particular moment, right? There's always something that that is always happening at different times. Like my friend over here, for instance, now. And then also try and vary your perspectives. Try and shoot high, low, far, near, because they kind of really tell you a fuller sense of space, of how things are happening. I employ the rule where I believe in that you have to shoot close to capture emotion, so you get as close as you can, because you want to feel part of it. You want to transcend the fact that this is something that is happening and something that you should feel as well. And then at the same time, you also want to kind of tell a bigger part of the story, where you kind of stand slightly further back, because you're trying to give a bit more about the space, but also what's actually happening as well. And then you want to stand as far away as possible, because there's a reason why we're in that space. You want to tell that story of why we're here, what we're doing here, what was happening at that time, and what it meant to that person at that particular moment in time. But also just remember that sometimes you got to also expect your luck. I stood here for about 20 minutes because I thought something would happen, and that happened in its moment. Or little John just decides to show up on the TV screen just to look at your bride to see that she's looking pretty. Or a groom who just kind of, I don't know. I'm really not sure what happened here, but the point is, things do happen. All right, so I'm going to leave you guys with a slideshow because I've shown you a lot of my wedding work, but a lot of my street work really is what I'm all about, and I hope you really enjoy some of the journeys that I've been through over the last sort of 2 years or so. So please enjoy this. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jide Alakija. Stick around, we got more to come. Ben Oliveras from Mexico here, a Nikon Mexico ambassador, here to talk to you about how to shoot spectacular weddings. Coming up in just a few minutes.